There's a little bit of noise.
There is a little bit of noise.
Okay, I think it was my mobile now.
Oh,
Because I just had it closed, but now I've just put it away.
better.
Okay, anyway. That's a good start. Um, hello. As you guys know, we will be having a discussion today about spiritual awakening, and I have Mel Stevens with me. We'll just do a short introduction. It's a live podcast episode so that people can join and have some questions at the end. But obviously, it will be available to watch on replay. So, yeah, if you want to just do a quick introduction, Mel, that would be cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Melanie Stevens. I'm a spiritual mentor, Reiki master and tarot reader from Devon.
Awesome. We have all of our links, by the way, available in the description of the video if you want to get in touch with any of us. And if you don't know me, I'm Kat Bazylko. I'm also based in UK. I'm a spiritual medium and healer, so I do mediumship readings, angel cards, and also healing sessions. And you can find the information on my website, which is also available in description. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start with, just to let you guys know that because this podcast or discussion is being recorded live, that means that we welcome your questions, but we will be open for those questions at the end of the discussion. So whilst you're watching, if you're watching us live and you come up with some questions, maybe just jot them down for now, and then when we'll tell you that it's time for the questions, then you can post it up. Otherwise, I just don't want it to get lost anywhere. Okay, so we're talking about spiritual awakening today. I think it's quite it can be a buzzword around as well. I think a lot of people, or from what I can see anyway, mentions that quite a lot these days. And so I wanted us to have a little chat about it and what it looks like, what is even spiritual awakening, how can you know if you are going through one, and maybe what to expect, and stuff like that. So maybe let's start. I don't know. Maybe let's start with what is spiritual awakening, Mel? What comes to your mind when someone asks you?
Yeah, so it's a phrase that encompasses so much. It's pretty huge. And when I think about all of the different aspects of a spiritual awakening, it's quite big. But in a nutshell, for me, the awakening is a journey that we go on. It sounds like it's some sort of episode that you have. Oh, I've had a spiritual awakening, like it's instant, and it's not. It's the beginning of your spiritual journey, and it starts very often. People start on their awakening journey when they lose a loved one, or they're faced with some sort of trauma that makes them suddenly question everything that they perhaps didn't question before. So it might be that you get to the stage where we're constantly being distracted in our lives with get a job, find a partner, have kids, settle down. We're always looking for that next goal and that next achievement. And for me, the awakening starts when we start to question, why are we doing all this? What else is there? What's the purpose of this? Why have we all come here to just do this? Is this it? Is this why we're here? And it's when you start to question everything in a curious way, just sort of getting curious about why we behave the way we behave, why we try and find happiness in external things when external things only bring happiness for a short period of time and then it goes. And then when we shift that focus to within, to how we feel about life and how we feel about our purpose, and if we've got a purpose, that for me is the spark of the awakening journey, which can last a very long time. I'm probably in my 4th year of mine now, and I'm still going through it. People might think, oh, but you're working in the spiritual realms now. Surely that means you've come through the other end. But I don't think I have. I think it's something that we're always working on ourselves and uncovering things and realizing things and having those epiphanies. And it's a journey.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that it's a journey. It's not something that I was going to say it's not something that happens overnight, but also in a sense, sometimes it can originally something might be sparked overnight. And like you said, it often happens when we go through some sort of a crisis, whether it's a personal crisis, maybe loss of someone, but maybe a loss of just purpose in life, or believe that whatever it is that you're doing actually doesn't make sense anymore. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that are kind of covering topics of spirituality and all of it, everything to do with spirituality. And I've heard that many people that are asked about their awakening is some sort of a crisis, but it honestly, it can be so different from every single person. Some of them mention a sudden experiences that are very out of this world, and they happen like once at night, or in a time, within like 3 days, consecutive 3 days. That also can happen, but it doesn't have to. It can literally take years until of preparation almost, and just different things happening in your life until you just become or sort of reach that stage of when you could call yourself, wow, now I can see. Because I suppose the term awakening, what is that about? It's about, I feel the way I understand it, it's about, to illustrate it, it's almost like you suddenly open your eyes that there is so much more to this life. And I think it goes down to the fact that actually I am a soul in a human body rather than a human, or just a human even, which is why things like you mentioned, your things that you've been maybe chasing up until now in your life, in your physical life. So most of, I suppose many of us, if not most of us, when they chase something, it's a lot of times career, right? So we're chasing something in the professional world, which usually has some sort of a purpose of, let's make more money, for example. And then we maybe, it's kind of like our compass as to where to go and what to do, and which has nothing wrong with it at all. But I suppose when you suddenly are aware that there's more to life, and that we're actually souls that just descended and started and are experiencing what life is, your perspective completely changes. And so maybe something that you called your purpose before and was in line with your career now is not necessarily related to your career so much anymore, for example.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, maybe if you wanted, we could share a little bit of our own experience, or what it looked like for us. I can start if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I had my awakening. Now I call it spiritual awakening. You see, it's not, also when it happens, it doesn't mean that oh, I'm going through spiritual awakening now. This is it. Like, no. It's it usually happens through a crisis. And I liked the comparison that someone made one day. I was listening to a podcast, and they mentioned being cracked open. Your heart cracks open. And that's definitely the experience I had, because up until that time, I was chasing definitely the external, I suppose, validation, in the sense of career. I was, chasing that career. I was thinking, oh, I have to be at this stage in my career by this age. And if I'm not there right now, then I'm doing something wrong. And then I was listening to a lot of advice, because I was trying to build a business at the time. And I was trying to find, all the instructions and directions and advice from all the people that are, the experts in the world of business and marketing. And I had no trust whatsoever in myself, right? Because I would go to the experts, I would listen to them, I would do what they said. And I was so caught up in that at some point I really went so deep that I have spent a load of money that I didn't have. And the thing is that I really believed at the time that this is the right thing to do, because I mean they're saying that it's going to work, therefore who am I to question, right? And it and in the meantime, at the same time, I went to the spirituals church with a friend of mine, because we were both interested in all of the, let's call it woo-woo subjects. So I was very much into numerology, astrology. He was the same. And we're like, oh, I heard about the spiritualist church. I'm like, oh, that's another thing to add on the list. Let's check it out. Um, and so it was kind of like happening at the same time. I have realized also during that time that I started to feel really, I think that the main drive for me was that I wasn't seeing the effects. So I was listening, everyone's telling me, and I'm like, yes, I'm supposed to be doing this, and yet I'm not seeing any results. So I was getting really, really frustrated, and also very much disbelieving in myself and my own abilities, right? Which is hard. I think many of us can relate to that. You just feel disheartened at some point, and you might start asking questions, right? What is this for? Am I doing it right? Is there something wrong with me? Blah, 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 blah. So I have sought the help of a hypnotherapist at the time. And although we had quite a few sessions, and there were a few things that we talked about, there is one thing that really stuck with me, and it was that I wasn't following my own guidance, and I kept listening to others. And when I say others, that's people in your life, that's, I don't know, teachers, media, books, like, people outside of you. It could be anyone, right? It doesn't have to be your family necessarily, but just everyone outside of yourself. And so we kind of worked through it. And I think that was the main point within those sessions. And since then, when I opened my eyes and we went, hypnotherapy, if someone doesn't know what's hypnotherapy and is interested, I have done a podcast episode on that as well, which is available on YouTube channel. And so because hypnotherapy works on your subconscious level, we have, let's say, encoded or decoded my belief around not listening to myself, and so I kind of like started doing that. And once I started doing that, I realized, hang on a minute, I actually don't want to do what I'm doing right now, and yet I spent all of this money. And now I can talk about this now, but it was so painful at the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, it just literally broke me down, cracked me open. I literally had a nervous breakdown. And it was, like I said, because it was during the time when I was getting into mediumship and all these things. Luckily, once I got into that, during that really difficult time for me, that's when I started my healing journey as well, through the support of spirit and all the people that are involved within this world of spirituality. At this time, it was mainly mediumship. And yeah, and it just really opened my eyes. Whilst I was really hurting, I was also very like, wow, So it was a real emotional roller coaster for me personally. But yeah, only I suppose after a while is when I maybe realized or called it a spiritual awakening of any sorts. And like you say, it is a process. And the healing, I think also I just wanted to mention, to end my story, is that the main thing for me was the fact that you or I, at least I think, but I think it might be similar with others, I stopped listening to others so much and just trusted in what my own internal guidance. And I think that's the biggest maybe thing that happens when you go through awakening, because you realize actually your soul knows everything that you need to know, and it will guide you towards the places and people that you need in order to help you in your path. You don't have to, just rely on everyone. And of course, people will be there to help you, and you still need people's help, but it will be up to you as to who you listen to, regardless of what they say, regardless of how much what's the word I'm looking for? How much they might try and push onto you that you really need them or you don't. You can really build up, and then you just build up your strength from inside out rather than the other way around, right? So that's that for me. If you wanted to share what it kind of looked like for you, then go ahead.
Yeah, so with mine started in 2009, and similar to you, actually, I had a bit of a breakdown, and I think this is that trauma that makes you start to question everything. Where for me, it was unfulfillment in my career. Everything else was fine in my life, but I was really not. I just couldn't find anything that I enjoyed. I couldn't find anything that lit me up. And for me, career is so important. I'm really ambitious. So to sort of go from job to job and just feel like, oh, I'm not enjoying this was really got me down. I didn't want to ruin my CV. I didn't want to look like I was job hopping, but I couldn't find
That's the same as me.
Yeah. It's horrible at the time because you feel like a failure and you're like, well, why are other people having a great career? Why am I not? What's wrong? The reason you feel so uncomfortable, that's your inner guidance system that you're talking about, telling you this isn't what you want to be doing. It has to feel uncomfortable or we wouldn't seek to change it. But you do get to this stage where you're just like, you're in such a state with it. And I went to see a life coach who introduced me to the Sedona method, which is something I now incorporate in my work, in my meditations. And at first I thought it was a psychological tool to help you overcome anxiety and fear and stuff like that. And it is. But the inventor of the Sedona method had a spiritual awakening when he was told he was going to die. He had loads of different illnesses and issues. And his doctor, I think he had like 3 heart attacks or something. And his doctor said he sent him home to die. Wow. This guy cured himself of all of these different illnesses and diseases that he had and went on to live another 40 odd years. And he did that through what is now known as the Sedona method. So I started looking into his life and the purpose behind this fantastic tool that I use that really, really helped me get out of a rut. It helped me get into a better place to be able to make better decisions and then find my dream job. And he was a real inspiration, and it was his awakening that created this program that's still being used now by people all over the world. But in addition to that, my life coach introduced me to people like Eckhart Tolle, a spiritual teacher who's loads of incredible, like best-selling books that have been translated into different languages all over the world. So that started my journey of, oh, okay, what's this all about then? And why am I here? And I understood about our true nature and the power of presence and stillness. And I mean, Eckhart Tolle teaches you that you are not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, they're not who you really are. Your identity that you've been clinging on to your whole life, that you're a female and you do this job and you're this age, none of it is actually who you really are. And that can contribute to that breakdown because it's quite scary. That's known as an ego death. That's when you realize that all of these, your thoughts and everything that you've always associated with who you really are, aren't you at all. You are the witness of those thoughts and you are the witness of the emotions rising. And your story is just a story. It's a role we play when we come to Earth. And we've probably been to Earth many times and played many different roles. And we might have had roles in other parts of the universe as well. And that realization is empowering but terrifying at the same time, because it does break down all of your previously held beliefs, everything you've been told in your whole life by society, by teachers, by everybody. So that for me, 2009, so I was 28, that was the start. And that kick-started everything for me. But then it really escalated in 2019, 10 years later, when I started learning Reiki. I started having experiences. I started to talked to my guides. I saw golden orbs floating in front of me, which I believe was an angelic visitation at the time. Things that defy logic, that you can't explain, that you're like, oh my God, what have I just witnessed? What was that? And again, it sparks that questioning of, well, what was that? Well, the only way you're going to get that answer is by going within and asking your soul that, like you say, has all the answers that you're looking for anyway. So you stop seeking answers from the internet, from books, from other people, and you start realizing, okay, that's useful, that's great, but you're only going to get to the truth when you turn that focus inward and sit quietly and ask, and then you'd be amazed at the answers that you're given when you give yourself space.
It's sort of like you now have your own internal filter to what information you take and you use or what you don't, because it's not to say that others are wrong. We're wrong. That's the whole beauty of it. We're all different and unique, and we're meant to be that way. So the whole, way of living, when we were trying to fit into society and follow certain rules, right? It just dissolves, and you just realize that actually we're all completely unique by design, because we're meant to be unique, because we all have a different role to play. We have a different path to take. And it's completely normal to do things your way, whilst just picking and choosing the snippets of what is right for you to do right now, or incorporate in your life, and what just leave. And if you leave it, it's okay, no matter how much someone might shout that you must do this to receive this result or whatever, you know. And I like that you mentioned, things that you saw. You started seeing things and feeling that defy logic, and I think that's another really big thing that happens when you realize actually logic is not the king, which we've been taught and learned, and this is the way of life actually right now still in most societies, if not all of them. I don't know, but we all base our trust mostly on logic, facts, everything that you can see and touch and physical, and that is the only truth, that there is. And we're not putting much value into anything that isn't logical, because we can't comprehend it logically. Just because we can't explain it, or we can't quantify it, or we can't count it, or see it, and all of these things, and we've never put that much value onto those things, and until you awaken, which I also describe as just being more aware. You're just aware of the wholeness of who we are really, and how the wholeness of life really, and how much of the, let's call it, I don't know, mystical, unseen, is actually at play and affecting our life. And actually, so we put, for instance, imagination on the back burner. Oh, it's just imagination, so it's not real. The concept of real in itself is very like, it's not, just because something is physically visible or something doesn't mean that it's real in that sense. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm getting into the whole illusion thing.
Yeah, and what's to say, I mean, even our language that we use, seeing is believing. Is it though? What about feeling?
Yeah.
But what's to say that when I close my eyes in meditation and I'm seeing things, what's to say that's not real and this is all imagination? Why is this just because I'm looking at something in front of me rather than looking at something with my eyes closed? I'm still looking at it.
And that's a very good example I always think about is, when you look for something in your house, for instance, but you don't have the mental picture of it, you're not going to see it, you'll miss it. If you're distracted and you're looking, but if only until you actually know in your mind what is it that you're looking for, the picture, then you actually see it. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, and everything that was ever created in our physical reality was a thought first, right? But also, apart from that, like you said, the feelings, I mean, are they not real just because you can't see them? Well, obviously they're very real. Thoughts are very real, you know. Yeah, and then I suppose once we go through this whole expansion of our awareness, then we just realize how our thoughts even sometimes aren't us. The thought is just a tool in a way as well. It's just our brain is just a tool to keep information, communicate the information, store information, all kinds of stuff. But it's not, again, it's not the king, right? And so we kind of going through this process. I personally definitely have put the thoughts away a lot, and I go by feeling and sensing and using all of the other faculties, let's say, that everyone has, but we just lost the trust in it because we've been taught that this doesn't matter, it's not relevant, it doesn't have value, you know.
And the thing is, your inner compass, your intuition. For me, my intuition has never let me down, and it's never been wrong. My head has
Oh yeah.
frequently. So when it comes to trusting, I don't always make decisions purely based on intuition. Very often, I'll think about things because that's just how I'm. As a human,
Yeah.
I think about things. I weigh things up. I look at the pros and cons. If I'm struggling to make a decision based on logic, the only other option I've got is to go within. I either get my tarot cards out, or I just go within and just ask my guides, okay, I need some guidance here. And they communicate with me through thought. It's mind-to-mind communication. So even the thoughts that come into my head aren't always coming from me. Sometimes it's coming from my
Mm-hmm.
guides, but it appears as a thought. And when people say to me, well, how do you hear your spirit guides? They think I've got some different voice in my head. It's my voice. It's
Mm-hmm.
my voice. It sounds like a thought. It sounds like me having a thought, but I know it's not come from me because it's
Mm-hmm.
either really obscure and random, and then it makes sense later, and I just think that can't have come from me, or it
Mm-hmm.
just sounds different. It's different wording to how I would use, but it sounds like it comes through in my voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think probably many of us experience it, but we just don't know. I
Mm.
always say probably and many because like I can't possibly know what other people's experiences are, but the way I understand it, because we all have a soul,
Mm.
we all have that ability. It's just a matter of how much we listen to it or not, and pay attention to it. Because I, for instance, remember that I always had a very strong knowing about things, but I never trusted it before. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't really think about it. The thing is that I would have a knowing about something, and yet my mind would be trying to explain it and think, oh, but really, do you really know? I mean, do you actually have an example of this and that to say that this is how it's going to be or this is what it's about? And I would talk myself out of it, and just not follow it and that's how I suppose my distrust in myself has been perpetuated because I just kept whatever I felt about something in a certain way. I would think, well, I don't actually know that, do I? About a certain person, for example. They didn't say anything to give me that idea. I haven't seen them do this and that. So how do I know? Right? Because I was, just constantly questioning everything.
Yeah, we try and logicalize everything, and sometimes you just know, and it is a thing. It's claircognizance when we've got clairvoyance, we've got clairaudience, clairsentience, all of these things where you see things, hear things, feel things that aren't tangible. So it's in
Mhm.
meditation, or we just have a thought come into our heads, or a word comes up, and we just know the answer to something, and we don't know how we know.
Mm.
But that claircognizance is something that I have as well. Sometimes I just know something. It's not come from a feeling. It's not come from somebody saying something to me, or hearing a thought. It's just a knowing about something. And it's just when you feel really comfortable with something and you trust it implicitly, and yet you don't know why. And I think after a while, you just stop questioning it and go with the flow, because it's
Mhm.
exciting then. Whereas it's very easy in the
Yeah.
first stages for our human brain to be like, but how? But how? Why do I know that? Nah, I'm making it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that happens. Oh, I'm making it up. It's just my imagination. I used to think I've got a very vivid imagination, because I can think up anything or whatever. But And I was also going to say that when we start listening to our internal cues, life does become easier. I just thought, because that was the very one of the biggest, I think, maybe surprise, I don't know, or lessons, or something that just honestly gave me a huge relief, was realizing that, because up until then, until that awakening in awareness that I had, oh my God, I felt hard. Life was so hard. And I was young, like I'm 35 now. And it was, around my 30s as well that happened. Saturn return, probably, for those into astrology. But um, I, I honestly, I even remember I was talking with a friend of mine when I reached 30, and I started telling her, like, do you know what? I just feel so tired with life, just with life. I'm just so tired. I feel like I've been pushing and just trying and giving my best, everywhere, trying to push. Like I said, at the time, I was trying to build the business while still working a job, but I was building a separate business, which I felt, or I thought more like, was the right choice for me. And I also had the idea that, once I start something, I better finish it. I'm not just going to leave it after 2 years or whatever, even if it becomes difficult. Because one of the things that I was being told was that when it becomes difficult, it means that it's worth it or something. I don't know. Anyway, all of these things. I was just exhausted. I was just exhausted. I was young and I had enough. And when I went through this whole transition and healing, and I learned, actually, whenever life is, when something is just so hard, and you just, no matter how much you try and you push and you try and you push, and it's just not happening, it's probably because it's not something you're meant to be doing. It's not actually what your heart is trying to, to experience in this life. You've come here with different strengths, abilities, whatever. Your path is meant to be a little bit different. So it's almost like trying to tell you, your whole body, your whole being is trying to tell you, stop, stop doing it. And I remember at the time I got my first card deck, Oracle card deck, the Wisdom of Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. And it was when I started asking myself, do I really want to continue with this business? It was personal trading at the time. And I internally, like, there was a very, like, a tiny voice there saying, leave it. But I was like, but my mind was like, no, I mean, I've invested so much money, invested so much time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be, a failure. I'm not going to be just, discarding it now after I've put all of this energy into it, like, like as if that's what you're meant to be doing in life. Like, you just keep going no matter how tired you are. So I was like, no, I will not. But then I got the cards, and so I asked the question, and the cards popped out for those who have the deck, time to go. I was like, oh, do you know what? Because by then I already understood the power of using the cards and listening to myself and how I feel about things. And once it came up, and I felt so relieved. I'm like, finally, like, something in a sense outside of me, because it was a card, but I pulled the card, told me it's time to go. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you. And I was like,
If it's a relief, that
yeah,
also tells you something. And I think there's a thing in our society where we're sort of told, if you don't succeed, try again, keep going.
yeah,
If something lights you up and you're so excited by it that you're determined because you love it and it doesn't work, and you try a different way and it doesn't work and you keep going, that for me means it is something on your path. And all of the trials and tribulations are part of your soul's growth, because we get the biggest growth through pain, difficulties. That's where we get the biggest soul growth, not through everything being easy, because where's the fun in that? But if you're pushing against something and it feels like you're wading through treacle and it's heavy and it's tiring and you get snappy, and that then for me is I'm not meant to be doing this. That's not to say everything on your path is meant to be easy. I don't believe it is. But you know, when something happens and it goes a bit wrong, and you just accept it and you go, oh, okay, there was a lesson in there for me, then I've learned something. Even the bad stuff does it flows because it's meant to be on your path. So there's a difference between something feeling hard work and heavy. It's that heavy.
Yes, I think it's also like the difference between, you know, like you say, if you're actually following something that lights you up and you really know, wow, I love doing this, but then you have challenges on the way, then you'll be happy to, you know, grit down maybe if you have to sometimes and go over the challenges and, you know, take rest when you need to and whatever, but you still feel the fire and the excitement for whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Which, it doesn't mean that there won't be challenges, but they're so different. It's so different than just trying to grind your way through something that just feels exhausting, you know, not just challenging in a positive way. Because I think we all as people like challenges. I think if there were no challenges, there would be no fun.
Exactly. And, you know, if you get stuck into a good challenge, you know, and that's not to say that we don't get frustrated when the tech doesn't work or, you know, Mercury's gone retrograde and we blame it for everything and, you know, that sort of thing. But if you still have that fire in your belly for it, it's on your path. And that's where you hear this phrase, are you on your path or off your path? And if you're off your path, you'll know it because it will just feel like you're lost through walking through fog. It will feel heavy. It will feel burdensome and tiring. And if you're on your path, it flows, whether it's a challenge or it's something enjoyable. There's just a delight in it. It just feels right. And it's tuning in, isn't it? Just tuning into your body is the best divination tool. We can use pendulums, we can use the tarot, and they're brilliant, but our bodies will always tell us if we're on path or not. We only have to tune into it, and we ignore it and we carry on and we just think, oh, I'm just tired, I'll just drink some caffeine or I'll just do something else.
That's such a big point to make when you do go through a spiritual awakening and you suddenly realize and reconnect with your body and how intelligent it is, you know, and sentient. Like obviously you're a sentient being as a human, but your body in itself, you know, without you using your brain, knows so much more than we give it credit for.
Yeah.
And we because living in our logical state of being, let's call it, we are very much mental beings. So we keep living in our head, right? We keep thinking about decisions, thinking about future, thinking about resolving or fixing a problem, fixing our body. You know, we would look probably, how many of us look in the mirror and they don't like something? Oh, I need to fix this, I need to fix that, because I probably saw someone on TV in the media and magazine that looks different and they say that this is beautiful, so now I must fix, right? And we just never stop and appreciate as to how our body is actually keeping us alive. Like that, do you ever think about how your heart is beating like all the time without you even thinking about it? Like you digest your food, you do all of these things, you know, but besides all of the physiology, it's, you know, it lets you know when you're tired, when you're maybe, if you don't stop, you're probably on the way to some sort of health problem, you know, because again, like you said, we would maybe start, I think you said that, sorry, something about fixing and like popping pills or something.
Yeah.
We have a pain. Yeah, we have a pain. So now we go to a doctor and the doctor gives us a pain relief pill or whatever else, you know, without even wondering, well, why did it come up in the first place? You know, because our body is the extension of our thought and of our soul. It just inhabits the body, and everything that's, let's call it wrong or forced in any way is really showing itself in our bodies, right?
I think another thing that's useful to point out, not that I want to put anybody off going through a spiritual awakening, but a symptom that's quite prevalent. I mean, I don't drink anymore. I don't drink caffeine. I did actually give up caffeine a few years ago, but then I just had like the odd cup, whereas it doesn't agree with me. My body doesn't like it. I don't touch it now. My body doesn't like alcohol. I can feel it burning my stomach when I've had a drink. I just feel like my insides are burning, and I have no tolerance for it anymore. So I know that might put people off a little bit, but it's just one of those awakening symptoms. And I gave up drinking 8 or 9 months ago, not 100%, but I just decided, you know what, it's making me feel a bit rough, so I'll just have the odd one. But pretty much been teetotal for quite a long time now. And I read them somewhere that somebody else said it's a spiritual awakening symptom. It's not just you getting older or something. Your body is physically changing, as well as your frequency, your vibration rising. So you can't tolerate the heaviness of the things that you used to be able to tolerate, and stuff like caffeine and bad food and alcohol suddenly affects you a lot more than it used to. So you might feel more inclined to make those changes far more than you would have done 10 years ago. And certainly that's something that I've experienced, particularly in the last year.
And you said that you don't want to put anyone off from spiritual awakening, but I don't think anyone can choose it anyway.
Oh, I won't have one of those. I'll keep drinking. I like gin too much. I'm not going to bother with a spiritual awakening.
I think, because it's not, again, like I think we mentioned in the beginning, it's not something that necessarily is happening, or you're planning for it, or it's going to happen at this point of your life. It's just, and I don't even know if everyone goes through it, honestly.
I don't think you do. I think sometimes we come to have a life to have the experience of having a life, and our soul isn't at the stage where it's ready to awaken on the earth. And so we might come back and have more lives until we're ready. And we're all different ages, if that makes sense. Some of us are old souls, some of us are quite new, and a new soul probably isn't going to come to earth and straight away have a spiritual awakening. They're going to come and experience life on the earth plane probably many times until they get to the stage where their soul is ready for that next stage of their evolution, which is to experience a spiritual awakening whilst you're on the earth. So I don't think everybody does.
No. And by the way, whoever you are, if you're watching, listening to it, then you probably are. Because that's the other thing, we come across things that are meant for us, and if it's not meant for you, then you probably will never be in your radar. Right.
And when we find it through that inner compass, we find it sometimes through our spirit guides. We'll just attend the right events. We'll read the right books. We'll meet the right people. The more random, the less random it actually is. The more it feels random. You suddenly meet somebody and have a really in-depth discussion about the spiritual awakening, and you think, oh wow, I wasn't expecting to meet this random person and have this random conversation, which has all been orchestrated. Either by your guides or your higher self decided before you came to the earth, you're going to meet that person on that day, and you're going to have that discussion, and it's going to lead you to discovering more about spirituality, and it's all orchestrated for us. So anybody that's finding they're seeing more things about spiritual awakening, and they're just going to events, and it's
probably asking questions, like life questions, right? And like, what am I doing? And they just keep coming across, and also maybe hearing other people talking about it, right? The synchronicities of that. If it keeps coming to you, even I remember when I started doing mediumship very early on, and it was during the pandemic, right? So we had the lockdowns, and there were very long queues at the shops to even go into the shop, because they obviously had to keep up distance and everything. And I was standing in the queue, and the lady behind me just randomly started talking about mediumship, and people, from the other side talking with her. And I was like, I've been coming to this shop for years, and this is the first time everyone ever is even talking about it. Because that's the thing with mediumship. I've heard nothing ever, until I went to that spiritualist church, until I found out that there is a spiritualist church in Swindon, and I decided to go with my friend, and then suddenly everyone around me is like talking about it, So it's just kind of funny how it happens like that. But those are just the signs, right, for you to follow and to confirm, yes, you're on the right track. Just listen, don't just dismiss it, thinking that you're going crazy or something. Whatever it looks like for you.
Yeah, and I think, and you can influence that as well. So if you're curious to know more about something connected to spirituality, you can put your thoughts out there to the universe and say, I want to know more about shadow work. I want to know more about awakening symptoms. I want to know more about past lives. And then you'll start to notice things cropping up around you because you've put your thoughts out that that's what you want, and the law of attraction will bring those to you. As much as you've also got you're going to meet certain people who you are always destined to meet. And I believe that's when we get that sort of deja vu feeling, when we meet somebody and we've never met them before, but we feel like we've known them for a lifetime. I personally believe that's because that's part of our destiny. That's what we've come here to experience, that you will go to this place at this time, and so will this person, and you'll meet at random, and you'll have a discussion, and that will become a lifelong friend. And these things are, our soul chooses these experiences before we come to earth, and these are part of what we call destiny or fate. It's like that was fated to happen, and there'll be pinpoints in our lives when something will just all fall into place and happen for us, and it feels familiar, and that's what we call deja vu. So I've had a few moments like that in my life. Everybody I'm meant to meet, and the experiences I'm having, I'm meant to have, but some are really strong, and I have met people before, and I've just looked at them and thought, I've never met you before, but I feel like I've known you for my whole life. It's really strange feeling. It's quite nice though.
Yeah, it's good. And I was just gonna, because we have another 15 or so minutes, I was just gonna touch upon the shadow work, because you mentioned the word shadow work, and so I thought maybe we can just talk a little bit about shadow work and healing during the spiritual awakening, right? Because what is the healing really like? Why are you cracking open? Why are you going through crisis? I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but I suppose I just wanted to expand on that slightly and just say that I feel that it mostly just brings up, like the spiritual awakening is here to awaken you to who you truly are in the sense of a soul, right? And that means how unique you are in the world, and therefore everything that you have learned up until now from the outside sources suddenly become not you, if that makes sense. It's like I think you mentioned you might identify as a woman, or I don't know, mortgage advisor. Like I don't know, like this is who I am. I am 30. I'm a mortgage advisor. You know, this is my identity. And then it actually turns out, well, not really. That's just what you do right now. But who you are, and then what qualities you have, like what qualities are you bringing into this world, might most likely have nothing to do with what you're actually physically doing as a job, let's say, or a career. This is just maybe how you're bringing through those qualities. So maybe, for instance, you now find out that, oh, actually I am, maybe people used to call me hysterical, but actually I'm just very emotional because I feel deeply, and this is not a bad thing. Now I can see this is just who I am. My soul has come here to express my emotionality, or whatever, my big heart, or however you want to call it. And so I bring it through my work, for instance. And so you almost like approach the work that you do completely differently, and you don't identify yourself with the physical work that you're doing. It's more like what you bring through it. So you end up seeing that whatever you do in your life, whatever you choose to do and feels it lights you up and makes you happy, is only dependent on what those experiences are meant to be in your qualities. So if you ever felt bad about changing jobs, for example, like in our example, you don't feel bad about it, because you actually know that maybe you were meant to experience all of these jobs. Each of them taught you something, and now you're going to take all of this and put it somewhere completely different, and yet it's still very valuable. And even though on paper you might look like someone who just can't stick to a job, for instance, you've actually taken out so much wisdom because you've grown as a person, and that doesn't define you in a sense.
Exactly. And all of that stuff comes from ego anyway. And that's and again, it's part of the awakening to recognize that when you worry that, oh, what will people think of me? Ego. Will my CV look bad? Ego. Why are you worried? You're projecting your lack of self-esteem onto what you think other people are thinking about you, whereas you don't know what other people are thinking about you. So give it up. But your ego is worried about becoming wounded. The ego is worried about somebody saying, well, you've had a lot of jobs, you can't stick to a job. And it's that fear of being offended. And the offended comes from the ego. Because our
And
true
that's the
nature
shadow
isn't offended
work,
by
right?
anything. Yeah, it can be, because your shadow work, you're uncovering aspects of yourself. And for me, recognizing, I bought a journal a few years ago to start looking at shadow work, and it just had a lot of prompts, and it got me thinking about what might be in our shadow. And the shadow self is the part of us that we either don't like to show to people, or we've been programmed and conditioned to hide from people. And we've all got stuff in our shadow. A lot of it comes from upbringing, a lot of it comes from school, society, culture. So if you were brought up in my era, and even worse, my parents' era, women were told, you know, little girls should be seen and not heard, was something that I heard quite a lot as a child. Girls should play nicely and sit quietly, and, you know, boys can go and do this, that, and the other. So there's probably a lot of women now who've got a real adventurous side, who wanted to climb trees as as a child and be brave and be loud and crazy, who were told, oh, no, you've got to sit and be quiet and behave. And not just girls, you know, a lot of children are told, don't be irritating to people, don't run around screaming, don't have a strop, don't have a tantrum, I'll put you on the naughty step, you've got to learn to control your emotions. So we've all got this wounded child inside us that wanted to express anger, wanted to have a tantrum, wanted to climb a tree and do all these things, but we were told not to. So that element of our personality gets pushed down into the shadow and stays there, because we grow up then thinking that that's not acceptable, it's not likable, people don't like it. Kids at school might be told that they're bossy if they're telling the other kids what to do. Well, maybe that's a leadership quality that started to arise, but the teacher said, don't be bossy, no one likes people being bossy, or don't brag, no one likes to show off, don't show off about things. So this confident leadership ability is then squashed by other people's programming and conditioning, and we push it down into the shadow and it stays there. And then as an adult, we struggle with leadership, we struggle with direction, we struggle to delegate, because all of those natural parts of our character were pushed down and repressed as children. And then when we get older, we find it difficult to drag them back out. So shadow work is about finding what's in your shadow, bringing it into the light, and integrating it into your personality, so that you're not hiding or feeling ashamed of any parts of you that are natural. And, you know, I have loads of tantrums now. I love it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and it boils down a lot to our emotionality being squashed, right? Because for a long time, anything to do with emotions was just bad, right? Even, you know, whether you're a girl or a boy. I mean, a girl probably had the allowance, let's say, was allowed to cry because girls are emotional, like in a derogatory way. Whereas boys, if they cry, oh, they're like a girl, you know. And it's like, whereas emotions are such a huge part of just being human, and yet we squash it down, we hide it, we become ashamed of it, we become, others shame us for all different kinds of things, and that's now, you know, spreads across all sorts of topics, you know, education, sexuality, religion, beliefs, like everything. Basically, there's just so much going on that we grow into these, or let's say we grow these little monsters within us that are just, you know, monsters as in fear, shame, guilt, you know, feeling unworthy, not good enough. And those can be really painful. You know, that's what the shadow work is. You dig in, you really dig in into all of this and try and, you know, bring it up to light, because unless it's brought up to light, it can't be healed. And it can be very, very uncomfortable. But also it's very, very liberating and healing. Yeah.
And I think this is why, and very much so in our society as well, in the UK, you know, we are quite reserved. And I think many of us struggle with confrontation. We don't like confrontation. It's uncomfortable. because we were shamed when we were stroppy as children.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, teachers, parents, other kids, nobody wants people to be kicking off and shouting and screaming, so
Yeah.
you get shamed or stared at, so you learn to suppress all of that. So there's probably a lot of people who struggle with repressed anger, which can materialize as health problems, physical health problems, as well as mental health problems. It can come out as pain. It can come out in all sorts of ways. So by integrating the shadow, you are healing that aspect of you, and you're welcoming that aspect of you. And even if it's a bit that you've pushed down because you don't want people to see you
That's it.
having
Yeah.
a strop,
Yeah.
because you felt embarrassed because people stared at you or thought you were a bit crazy, it's bringing that up and pouring self-love onto it. And I would want to add, actually, anybody that's thinking about doing shadow work, I would only do it if you're already feeling quite confident in yourself. And if you're not, I would leave that alone until you've done some self-love work first and learn to love yourself, and then do the shadow work, because it is uncomfortable, and yet you absolutely use the right word with liberating as well. It's liberating, it's empowering, but it's uncomfortable, and you need to be in quite a strong place before you delve into that kind of work.
And you would know when the time is right. Don't think that you maybe should be doing it because, you know, you're meant to, because it's a good idea or people talk about it. You will know. Again, that's when we go back to our own internal compass. Do you feel like you're ready and it's the right time? You know, if it isn't, then just don't do it. Because things, again, in that sense, life becomes easier, is that you can tell when the time is right and when it isn't, regardless of other people's time scales, for instance, or the world's time scale, right? You don't worry about that because you know that it doesn't matter. So yeah. Yeah, good. Well, I think we've chatted for long enough. If there are any topics, you know, that you guys listening to it would like us to pick up on a little bit more, maybe another time, then let us know, because there's a lot that we covered. But I'm not sure if anyone is watching live right now. I'm not seeing that at this very second, because I could see some people before, but right now I'm not sure if there is anyone. But if there is anyone with questions, then please let us know. And if not, then yeah, questions after the recording are also fine. And I think, you know, whether we record another episode or do like a Q&A session, if there were many, I don't know, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. I suppose if we get lots of questions, it might be easier to do another live and answer and go through the questions one by one. But if it's one or two, if people do miss the live and they put it in the comments section of the video on YouTube, and then or in your group, then we can pick it up. We can pick them up afterwards. But if there is a lot, then yeah, it might be easier to do another live to answer the questions. It's a big issue. It's a big topic
It's
for
a very big
discussion.
topic, yes. Yes. And if, you know, because Mel, you'll be sharing it on your site, so obviously commenting on your channel and your Facebook page is also fine, you know. Yeah, cool. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's a very important topic, and one that definitely it's good to hear others talk about it, because it might make our experience a little bit easier, you know, because it can be hard, but also it's really great. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going through this pain, but it's also so great because I'm learning all these things and discovering things about myself, and I'm actually healing and empowering, right? It's a very experience that definitely leads to empowerment, most of all.
Absolutely, it's definitely worth it. And it's only, you know, like I said earlier, that the painful excuse me, the painful elements are where we get our biggest growth anyway.
Biggest rewards, yes. And
yeah, it's worth remembering that at the time when you're going through it, thinking, oh, I can't stand this anymore. And we didn't talk about today, but we could do another episode talking about existential depression and existential crisis, when you just question, why am I here? What's the point in all this? And that can be really hard. And I've been through that a couple of times, so we could touch on that. And I think that the key thing is finding other people that are talking about it and recognizing why you're going through it, because at the time you're in such a bad place, you don't know why you're going through it. It's once you've come out a little bit that you reflect and think, aha, that's what I experienced. And you hear other people talking about existential depression and you recognize, well, that's what I had. I thought it was just regular depression, but it's actually linked to the point of being here and purpose in life and feeling
And
like.
and it's some sort of a prompt and a sign that maybe, it's time, that there's change coming, transition coming. I think that's good to mention as well, because although it might take a while, it, when you're in that state, depressive state, and I can only imagine, you don't have any hope, right? And you just feel like, well, the life has ended, it's ending, there's no point. But yet again, it's there just because there's something else coming that's better. It's just it's a transition period, and most of all, just take care of yourself at the time, and don't beat yourself up, and don't push yourself, or if anyone's trying to push you to, do things, I don't know, whatever that may be, it's probably just a prompt for you to take things easy, actually, and just slow down and look after yourself.
That's when the sort of the self-love and the self-care is really important at that point, because actually when you're in that space, all that matters is you, prioritizing you. And at that point, you absolutely do need to be selfish. Being selfish shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, because we've got to look after ourselves first. We can't look after anybody else unless we put ourselves first.
Definitely.
Particularly when we're in that space of existential crisis, where we're just like, at the time, you don't want to be here. And it's like being in a big black hole. It's awful, but you do come out of the other end with patience and a lot of self-love and a lot of care. You do come out the other end. It's just part of it. Unfortunately, it's part of the process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, I think we'll end here. I don't think anyone has any questions. So it's been lovely speaking to you, Mel. And
yeah, you too.
Time, I suppose.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.